The following program is brought to you in conjunction with the folks at Grace to All with Paul Gray. Now we bring to you the Agape Guy Show with your host, Lenny Manning. Hello everybody and welcome to the Agape Guy Show. I'm your host, Lenny Manning. I've got a big announcement to make on the show today. The announcement is, I finished the work on my book about my life, and I can say it is now available on Amazon. This book is about my long journey through life and how I believe God led me to learn about His agape love. There were many ups and downs with good times and bad times as I went through this process. Yet as I look back on it all, I can see that God was guiding me the whole time. So I'm happy to present to you the new book, Journal to a Journey. The subtitle is, My Life is More Than Wishes and Dreams. The reason I added that subtitle about dreams is that I had some interesting dreams that gave me divine guidance. At least that's what I believe. One of those dreams was where a glowing person walked up to me and basically told me to leave the church I was attending. It turned out that the next church I attended was where I learned about God's love. Let me show you a short video presentation of the book right now. What would you do if you had a dream where a glowing person told you to leave the church you attended? What if you then ended up learning about God's unconditional love and it forever changed your life? Learn about these and other miraculous events that guided one man's life. Read the new book, Journal to a Journey, now available on Amazon. Wow, that was really good. That was a great video presentation. The book is now available on Amazon, and you can go to the search box on Amazon's website and look up the title, Journal to a Journey. As you might have noticed from the video, I had a few occasions in my life where I was guided by miraculous events. Let me give you some background before we get into that. You see, I had some difficulties in life that led me to ask some tough questions about life. I also talk about those difficulties I went through that made me question my beliefs. The miraculous guidance then started with a series of dreams I had. A glowing person told me to leave a church I was attending. The next church I attended was where I learned about God's unconditional love. That changed my life forever, and I simply haven't been the same since. Some friends and family thought it was nice that I learned about God's love, but it made others a bit unhappy. So as you might be able to guess, my life had a lot of ups and downs after that. Sometimes it seemed like my life was just a wild roller coaster ride and I didn't know what would happen next. I had a few more miraculous dreams since then, and I had some rather life-altering conversations with God. Through the years, I loved watching Paul Gray's videos, and I liked watching his videos on the World Inclusion Network website. That website's no longer up and running. I think it's owned by some other people or another company now. Through the years, I lost track of Paul Gray when the website was shut down, but another big conversation with God led me back. God showed me that I needed to give some things over to Him, and as I did, I found Paul Gray on social media again. I then got in his private group a short time later, and after that I had another interesting dream about talking to Paul Gray. Then a few months later, I had another dream, and it led me to contact him in an email. That led me to meet with him and a small group of people on an internet video call on Sundays. I've continued meeting with that group to this day. If you'd be interested in joining us on that video call, you can go to the private Facebook group called Grace to All with Paul Gray. Someone posts a link there every week, and you can click on the link to get into the video call. Now, the big reason I wanted to write this book was to help people understand what I learned about God's love. I'd also like for people to see the circumstances of my life that led me to learn about God's love. I also wanted people to see the process I went through to get there and things I went through since then. I've learned a lot of other things through the years, but I didn't talk about that other stuff all that much in the book. I didn't want any of that stuff to distract anyone from the main message about God's love. I wanted the typical Christian audiences to be more willing to accept the book and read it. If I get a chance to do a sequel, I'll put a lot of the other stuff I learned in that other book. Let me tell you a bit about my background. If you've watched this show before, you likely already know a little bit about me. Now, I grew up in a middle-class family on the East Coast of the United States. As I grew up, my family also attended fundamentalist Christian churches. I also attended Christian schools from kindergarten till I graduated from high school. As I got out of high school, I started listening to a radio program where I learned a lot of deep theology. The guy had theologians as guests on his show fairly often. I listened to a lot of the theologians and the Christian authors on his show. I even got his magazine with articles written by theologians and Christian researchers, authors, and deep thinkers. I then started to see some problems in churches I attended because I saw conflicting ideas and practices. It seemed like their theological beliefs and practices didn't align with the theology I was learning. I made the mistake of asking questions, challenging ideas and practices, and even challenging the leadership. It seemed like that got me marked as a troublemaker, and I started to become the target of a lot of verbal and psychological abuse. I left a few churches because of that type of abuse. I was very involved in a few different churches throughout the years. I also had experience with both traditional and contemporary styles of church groups. I had experience in teaching, preaching, music ministry, and other various activities in leadership positions. I kept having difficulties with spiritual abuse from church leaders that left me questioning my beliefs. I then had a life-altering experience with God's love that brought major changes in my life. That isn't an exaggeration either. I give details about it in the book. Some friends said that God's love changed my life so much that I acted like a totally different person. It was quite a dramatic change that led to a drastic change in my behavior. I went from being a person with very condemning attitudes to being a person with genuine care for other people. I didn't seem to fit in typical conventional church groups anymore after learning about God's love. I visited other church groups and didn't seem to fit in any of those either. I even tried my hand at house churches and organic churches. I even had friends who were into emergent church and missional church. So I have a vast array of differing forms of experience, and I'm familiar with different types of church groups. As I kept progressing through life, I kept learning more things, and I kept conforming my beliefs to God's love. Sometimes people appreciated that I followed after God's love, and sometimes they didn't. I learned how to give good evidence for believing in God's love as well. Sometimes people liked to hear about it, and sometimes they didn't. Yet I still kept believing in God's love anyway. Even if people told me I was wrong about believing in God's love, I kept believing in it anyway. I had some miraculous changes in my life, and in my opinion, it was irrefutable what love had done in my life. Clearly, God had done something in my life that changed me for the better. So I knew there was something to this stuff about God's love. I could also see a big lack of the fruit of the Spirit in people who were opposing God's love. So I refused to turn away from God's love, and I just stuck with it. This led me to meet a few other people who believed similar things about God's love. I enjoyed learning from them and interacting with them. I've learned to appreciate and value friends who believe in God's love. Now, if you read the book, you'll notice I received guidance from miraculous events on a few different occasions. I can tell you that I've been to church groups that believed in dreams sent from God, and some churches that didn't believe in that sort of thing. So as I analyzed those dreams I had, I tried to look at them from both perspectives. I used both perspectives on figuring out how to react to the dreams. I asked myself, what should I do if this was from God? I also asked myself, what should I do if this dream wasn't from God? Some of the dreams I had seemed to confirm some things I was already thinking about or I was already concerned about. I even had times when I doubted God's love and had some big conversations with God that set me back on track. You'll need to read the book to see how those things happened and see how it turned out. It's shocking to read about some of the stuff that I've experienced in my life. I'm still amazed as I look back on some of those things that happened. I'm still just shocked and amazed myself. I've enjoyed watching videos and written material from a few different people through the years. I even had more miraculous events and dreams that led me to Paul Gray. I had enjoyed his videos and then lost track of them through the years. Then, as one of my big conversations with God put me back on track, I got back in touch with Paul Gray. A few more dreams led me to contact Paul Gray when he was starting a new group that was involved in an internet video call on Sundays. I've been involved with that group ever since that time. Whatever the situation you might have in your life, I hope you can get to know God's love for yourself. If you don't know about God's love, I'd suggest a couple of things. First is that you should ask God to show you that love in whatever way it takes for you to see it. I'd also suggest reading my book because I list a few books that I think can help because they helped me through the years. If you watch the first 2 episodes of my show on YouTube, which is called the Agape Guy Show, I mention those books as well. So you can find them in Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2. I'd also like to thank a few people who encouraged me along the way. I've learned to be thankful for friends who are living from God's love. These folks have been very precious, and I consider them very highly valued friends. I'd like to thank Paul Gray for being somewhat of a mentor and an encouragement to me. He's passed on now, but I will always remember him with fondness in my heart. I'd also like to thank Mr. Don Keithley for being an encouragement to me. I would also like to thank a special group of people that were friends of Paul Gray that he called the DEEM team. DEEM, D-E-E-M, stood for Delightfully Expecting Effortless Manifestations of God's Love and Goodness. I'd also like to thank a few other friends that have been an encouragement to me through the years. These are people that have been on the DEEM team and some other friends as well. I mean friends like Ben, Jerry, Melissa, Bethany, Bob, Nancy, Joe, Stan, Robert, Philip, Dana, James, Wendy, and Julie. I'd also like to thank my mom for being an encouragement. I'd especially like to thank Bethany and Melissa for helping me with the editing process on this book. Right now, I'd like to go to something else. So we'll switch gears here for something else. Okay, now I'd like to put a QR code so you can make a donation to help support this show. I'd like to put a word of caution here for this next segment of the show because we're going to talk about some a bit rough content. So it might be PG-13 and it might not be suitable for younger children. I'm going to be talking about the subject of taking one's own life, which is a problem that I had a few years ago. I was extremely depressed. I can also tell you that before I learned about God's love, that I was in just completely drowning in the depths of despair. I was extremely depressed. There were times when I wondered if maybe Christianity was a lie or a big scam. I'd heard that it was supposed to be about living by faith or living out your faith. Yet all I heard from several different preachers was teaching on how to live by works. There was almost no teaching about faith, and there was no teaching about God's love. There was almost no teaching about how a person could learn to follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit for themselves. There were also times when I thought life just wasn't worth living. I thought about walking away from the church, from Christianity, and I was even going to walk away from God. Then something very interesting started to happen. I had some dreams that seemed to indicate a few different things that were going to happen. I wondered if I should follow the direction that these dreams seemed to be pointing me toward. I seemed to be guided through some turbulent times where things seemed to just get worse and worse. Then when things seemed like they were going to get better, they got even worse. During this time, I started to think about leaving a bad church situation that I was in, and I started looking at other options. During that time where I was looking for another church to attend, I got even more depressed, and I wondered if there were no good church groups out there at all. I wondered if all church groups were abusive, and if I would be miserable no matter where I attended. There were a few times when I thought about ending it all, but another series of miraculous events occurred. Every single time I started making plans in my own mind about how I would end it all, the exact same song kept coming on the car radio. This happened at least 10 times over a period of a few months. I started to notice after a while that this same song would start playing every single time I had those thoughts. It was almost like an episode of some mysterious television show, kind of like the old Twilight Zone stuff, or something like that. Every time that song came on the radio, it was just enough to soothe my emotions and calm me down. Every single time I started thinking those thoughts, that song would calm me down enough to stop me. So, it had to be some type of miraculous events. It sure seemed like it anyway. A short time after that, I had another dream where I was basically told to leave the church I had attended. That's when I was going to give this whole attending church thing one last chance. It turned out that the next church I attended was where some people taught me some more in-depth stuff about God's love. I can tell you that as I was growing up, I attended church groups that didn't believe in dreams from God. I didn't believe in that stuff either. Yet it started to happen to me, so I had to kind of reassess my own thoughts on the matter. I've heard Steve McVey talk about some miraculous stuff that happened in his life, and he didn't want to overhype it. He didn't want to be the next type of person that exaggerates the things that happened even bigger and bigger with every single time he talks about it. That's also one of the reasons why I wanted to type all the things out in my book. I wanted to make sure it was accurate and that I didn't embellish or exaggerate over time or sometime out in the future. A lot of these dreams I wrote down a short time after they came to me. I also tried to keep track of this stuff and when it happened. I wanted to keep an accurate record of all of it. I didn't want to be a person who exaggerated the dreams every time I told about it, mentioned it, or something like that. I didn't want it to get bigger and bigger with every single time I talked about it. So I didn't want to say that I had a dream where Jesus says something like he loved me, but then the next time it gets bigger, like I'd say, Jesus loves me, but he wants us to build a church building for 500 people. And then the next time I tell it, it's God wants me to raise $1 million. Then the next time it's several $1 million. So I didn't want to exaggerate and just make it bigger and inflate the whole situation. Besides, most people that know me will tell you that I'm usually a quiet and shy person. I don't like to talk a lot, and when I was young, I could go for days without talking, and it was easy for me to do that. I don't really feel comfortable talking about some of this stuff because it's very personal to me. Yet, some people have told me that I should tell these stories and write them down to keep a record of them. Now, it's difficult to tell your life story in a way that people will understand unless you give them all the details, or most of the big details. So I wanted to give as many of the details as I could so people could understand how I got to this point in my life. Yet, sometimes there are good times when good stuff happens. Then again, there are also times when life is painful and you need to walk away from some bad situations to keep your sanity. Hey everybody, let me jump in here to explain something about the book. You might notice that the book lists the author as Mr. Anonymous. Now, I work together with my friend and author who calls himself an anonymous follower of Jesus. We work together on books, and we allow each other to use the name Mr. Anonymous. That's one reason I use the name, but there are other reasons I use the pen name Mr. Anonymous as well. I mentioned those other reasons at the beginning of my book in the preface. Let me read it to you so you can understand why I kept my name off the book and used the pen name Mr. Anonymous. Here's what I wrote in the preface. Quote, I have left my real name out of this book for a few reasons. One reason is that I don't want my name or reputation to distract from the main theme, which is God's love. I also wish to protect myself from abusive detractors. I would like to protect the privacy of people I mention in the book as well. Therefore, I've changed the names and the people mentioned in this book. End quote. So that explains why I left my name out of the book. So let's move on. Let me jump in here and mention something else and ask you folks a question. I was thinking of making some animated videos of my life story that I put in my book. I would like you folks to make some comments in the comments section below this video. I'd like for you folks to let me know if you would like to see some animated videos to illustrate the things in my book. You see, I have a few different types of software that I can use to make animated videos. Let me show you some of the animations I can make, and you can decide for yourself. Here's a few animations that I made. Hello and welcome to the show. This is a little taste of the animation work that I can do. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your animated narrator, brought to you by Lenny Manning. Wow, that was good. I thought those were some good videos and some good examples of some of my animation work. Let me know what you think. I'd like to know if you want to see some animated videos that illustrate things from my life story in my book. Now that we're getting near the end of the show, I'd like to say a little something. I bet a lot of you would like to support this show, but maybe your finances are a bit tight. I sure can understand that. I can see how you feel like it's difficult to make a big donation when it's difficult to pay for groceries and other bills. So, I have an idea for you. I know a way you can help support this show and get something in return for your money. Here's my idea. You can purchase my new book since it's now available on Amazon's website. If you purchase the book, that would help support this show and you get a copy of the book to read. I also trust our friends in Europe and around the world can also find their local Amazon affiliates website on the internet. You can go to Amazon's website and type in the name of the book, which is Journal to a Journey. The book is available as an Amazon print-on-demand paperback, and there's also a Kindle ebook version. The Kindle version costs less, which helps if you're on a tight budget. The Kindle version can also be downloaded so you don't have to wait several days for it to be delivered. I kind of like the ebooks myself. As for now, let me give you a few words of encouragement. Considering all the miraculous things that happened so I could learn about God's love, I think there is always hope. I've also experienced miraculous guidance in my life after I learned about God's love, so I think God can always give you some guidance. So I'd suggest asking God to do whatever it takes to show you His love. I know God can show you what agape love is really like. I know God can help you learn about His unconditional love. Here's a quote from Wayne Jacobson's book, He Loves Me. This is a quote where he's talking about God's love. Here's what he says. There is no one that God doesn't love with all that He is. I think that's something we should all remember. I want you all to remember that God loves you with an everlasting and unconditional love. Now, if you remember, I've got some QR codes up on the screen. One is to purchase my book, and the other one is to support this show by making a donation to support the show. As for now, I hope you get to know God's love for yourself and learn to live from that love. As for now, I'm Lenny Manning, the host of the Agape Guy Show, and I hope to see you on the next episode of the show. Have a great day. Goodbye for now. What would you do if you had a dream where a glowing person told you to leave the church you attended? What if you then ended up learning about God's unconditional love and it forever changed your life? Learn about these and other miraculous events that guided one man's life. Read the new book, Journal to a Journey, now available on Amazon.